The school bell rang every day at exactly the same time, sharp and metallic, slicing through the noise of restless children and echoing off the faded walls of the public elementary school. For most students, lunchtime was the highlight of the day, a brief escape filled with chatter, laughter, and the comfort of food packed lovingly or bought with pocket money. But for some children, lunchtime carried a quieter weight, one that settled in their stomachs long before hunger ever did. The boy sat at the far end of the cafeteria, on the bench closest to the wall where paint peeled like old scars. His uniform was clean but worn thin at the elbows, the fabric softened by years of careful washing. He opened his lunchbox slowly, not out of excitement, but habit. Inside lay a simple meal, two slices of bread folded over a thin spread, cut unevenly, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. It was always the same. It was always enough for him. Across from him, another child sat still, hands folded, eyes lowered. That lunchbox remained unopened day after day, not because it was full, but because it was empty. Teachers noticed, but said nothing. Children noticed too, but children learned early which things were uncomfortable to ask about. Hunger had become invisible, blending into routine. The boy noticed. He noticed the way the other child's eyes followed food trays. He noticed the way that child drank extra water, hoping it would quiet the ache inside. He noticed the stiffness in the shoulders, the forced calm that came from pretending not to need. And without understanding charity or sacrifice in words, the boy understood it in instinct. One day, without pause or performance, he slid half of his sandwich across the table. There was no announcement, no expectation, just a simple movement, as natural as breathing. He kept his eyes down, chewing slowly, as if nothing had happened. The other child hesitated, then accepted. From that day forward, the sharing became routine. Not a grand gesture, just consistency. Each morning at home, the boy's mother packed the same lunch. She never complained. She never added more. She knew exactly how much food they could afford, and she trusted her child to eat enough to get through the day. What she didn't know was that her son had quietly decided that enough could be divided. The cafeteria staff began to notice small changes. One child seemed less withdrawn. Another seemed thinner, though he never asked for seconds. Teachers noticed improved focus in one student and growing tiredness in another. Patterns emerged quietly, like footprints no one bothered to follow. Until one day, someone did. The principal had been having a difficult year. Budget cuts had stripped the school of resources. Free meal programs were limited, paperwork endless, approvals slow. Every decision felt like choosing who deserved help more. The weight of it pressed heavily on him, though he rarely showed it. He walked the halls with practiced authority, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp but tired. That afternoon, he entered the cafeteria unexpectedly. He did this often, believing leadership required visibility. As he scanned the room, something caught his attention. A small motion, a familiar exchange. Bread moving from one side of a table to another. That he stopped. The principal watched as the boy broke his sandwich cleanly in half, pushing one piece forward without a glance. There was no embarrassment, no drama, just quiet generosity repeated for the 100th time. The principal felt something tighten in his chest. That he watched more closely. He saw that the boy never ate first. He waited. He saw the way the other child's posture changed once food was shared, shoulders relaxing, hands steadier. He noticed the way the boy drank water afterward, filling the space where hunger remained. The room felt suddenly louder, then unbearably quiet. The principal turned away, pretending to check something on his clipboard, but his vision blurred. Years of policies, meetings, and speeches had never prepared him for this. He had spent his career discussing values, writing mission statements about kindness and inclusion. Yet here it was, lived out silently by a child with almost nothing to give. He followed the boy later, not to interrogate, but to understand. Records told part of the story. A single-parent household. Income just above assistance thresholds. No complaints. No requests. Perfect attendance. Quiet excellence. The kind of family that slipped through every safety net because they never asked to be caught. The principal sat alone in his office that evening long after the school emptied. Papers lay untouched. The image replayed in his mind over and over. A child sharing lunch not because he had plenty, but because someone else had none. The simplicity of it crushed him. That he realized then that poverty wasn't always loud. Hunger didn't always come with warning signs or forms filled out in triplicate. Sometimes it sat quietly at a table, waiting to be noticed. The next day, changes began quietly, deliberately. Meal programs expanded without announcement. Extra food appeared where it was needed without labels or explanations. The principal made calls that required humility, emails that admitted failure, decisions that finally placed children over bureaucracy. But before all of that, before any policy or program, he did one thing he hadn't done in years. He allowed himself to field in the empty cafeteria after school. The principal stood alone, staring at the table where the sharing had happened. The echoes of lunchtime laughter still lingered faintly. And there, surrounded by the evidence of his own blind spots, the weight of it finally broke through. Not loudly, not publicly, but deeply. The tears came not from sadness alone, but from recognition. From understanding that the most powerful lesson taught in his school that year hadn't come from a textbook or a lesson plan. It came from a child who believed that kindness didn't need permission. As the sun dipped low outside the windows, casting long shadows across the cafeteria floor, the principal made a silent promise. No child in that school would ever have to choose between dignity and hunger again. And somewhere, at home, a mother prepared the same simple lunch for the next day, unaware that her child's quiet act had already changed more lives than he would ever know. The bell would ring again tomorrow, and nothing would ever be quite the same.